I'm Leanne Sanders, sitting in for Sierra Bettens. Welcome to In Focus. On this episode, are we prepared for the upcoming wildfire season? It's already well underway.
Dozens of people in James Smith Cree Nation in Saskatchewan were evacuated to Melfort on Saturday.
Risk for fires remains high.
Extreme heat and dry conditions only added fuel to the fire.
Fire crews do have things under control and preventive steps are being taken.
Kahnawake Cree Nation in Manitoba evacuated the Big Eddy and Carrot River.
Our forests are bursting into flames and people are having to flee their homes. It's been happening for years. As a country, are we getting better at our preparation? Arnold Lazare is the interim executive director at the Indigenous Fire Safety Council. He joins me from Kahnawake. Arnold, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Good morning.
Arnold, I know that your organization does some good work with groups across the country. We were chatting about one of the big initiatives that you have had over the last number of years, lobbying the government for a national fire suppression team. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Through a grant with NRCan, we received funding to train 430 youth in wildland firefighting. And the latest numbers we have is that there's been 174 people trained. This is to occur over 3 years, and it would bring them to a level 2 wildland firefighting. And yes, part of our goal would be to have a national mutual aid system that could deploy.
Now, what would that look like? How would it respond, and how would it be better than what's in place currently?
Well, currently there's no mechanism for interprovincial agencies with specific to Native. For instance, during the Williams Lake fire, they brought in firefighters from Mexico and South Africa and Australia at a cost of $90 million just for flights in 2023, when we had 100 trained, certified Indigenous firefighters in Saskatchewan, and there was no mechanism to deploy them. It's our hope that by becoming the national certifying body and having an active list, and preferably with some funding from the provincial agencies, we would have an on-call team that would be ready to deploy as soon as needed. I imagine the flights from Mexico and Australia and South Africa are quite long. Flying from Saskatchewan to BC is not so long.
Right. Well, and I have heard from some of the officials that I've spoken to provincially that what's been happening here this season, and I'm sure happens in other seasons, is that something that starts out fairly small, maybe a brush fire that got out of control or a grass burn, can quickly turn into something quite devastating.
We are noticing that the small fires have grown into bigger conflagrations. Just take a look at Los Angeles. Take a look at what happened in Japan. There's Jasper. You just have to look at any daily news, and you'll see that small. Well, we've said a long time ago, big fires start small. So the faster you can get a team on site, the better.
Right. Now, with this team, I guess when you say that they would be able to respond immediately, how would that look on the ground for people?
Well, theoretically, we would have the database of who and when, where people are. And once a need has been requested, we would handle arrangements to get the teams on the ground in the affected areas. There's been training in Indigenous communities across the country. So once again, with the NRCan program is 430 specific, but there have been other agencies. The Maritimes have had some training done. So in each area, there's people willing to participate.
In the case of, the federal level having cooperation between the provinces, why has that been such a barrier?
I'm not 100% sure what causes it. I think part of it is silo building. That of course they need agreements, and because we're a federal jurisdiction, and the provinces have provincial powers, there creates a gray zone that we seem to fall into. The only other agency that would be similar to us is the military. And even then, there's some obstacles to using military personnel. So we're working with the different agencies to try and identify one of the obstacles, and then more importantly, finding solutions. We're all about solutions. Once the problem's identified, it's half corrected.
When we were chatting the other day, Arnold, you had mentioned that when fires happen on a First Nation, it's quite a different scenario than what people would see in a city where they don't know their neighbors.
Yes, well, and I mean, this is true for all smaller communities. As a firefighter of 45 years here in Kahnawake, when we go to an ambulance call, or a fire, we know the people. I mean, my first career, I was in education. I was a counselor, so all the most of the kids went through our school system. We know each other. So when there's a fire, it's either a relative, a distant relative, a good friend. Somebody, I mean, everybody knows somebody who's affected. So I hate to put a thing on pain or suffering, but it is much closer to home than, say, in the city of Montreal, which is a little more faceless as a responder.
Right. And we've also noticed in speaking other years with fire evacuees that it's quite traumatic and having to leave their homes. And for some, it's re-traumatizing because they were made to stay in dormitory-like accommodations away from their homes. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, sure. So, I mean, the residential school syndrome issue has been well documented, that in many cases, children were forcibly taken from homes. And the sad reality is during an evacuation, what is occurring? We are taking, well, what would have been children back 30, 40, 50 years ago who are now elders, and we're removing them from the community. We're putting them in dorm-like agencies, gymnasiums, and we end up re-traumatizing them. So we try and not to re-traumatize them. We need to be cognizant that there is things happening. So we're extra careful about that, and part of it is trying to work with the community to say, providing them with good information, saying, look, there is a fire coming. I mean, with most fires, we have a little bit of leeway, but we will readmit people back to the community when ABC is met, so that the people know they're returning to the community. I mean, the sad part is if we look at Alberta, where the total communities were lost, then that's a different scenario.
Right. It takes time to rebuild infrastructure and homes, I'm sure.
I mean, part of it is planning and preparedness. As an agency, we ask communities that they need to look and be prepared. So they'd say, well, what are your plans to evacuate, and what are your plans to reintegrate? That's the items that are just as important. And if you can communicate that to the family, then there is less of a trauma created.
Yeah, I can't imagine returning to the community and seeing possibly some devastation from a fire. That would be incredibly difficult.
And we've seen it in many instances where House A burns down and House B is untouched. You talk about guilt, you talk about sadness, you talk about anger, you talk about questioning. All these emotions come out, and they're all legitimate. I mean, that's one thing we talk about is the legitimacy of the feelings, all in an effort to try and help people be resilient, which we are.
Arnold, what is the next step now for your organization as far as this National Fire Suppression Wildland Fire Team? Is there a fair amount of lobbying going on with the federal government?
Well, I'm pleased to hear that the new Minister of Indigenous Services, I believe she's Cree, was the executive director or grand chief of the Cree Nation in Quebec, and the Minister of Indigenous Relations is from Northwest Territories. So we're hoping. I mean, we're hoping to meet with them to determine how we're not asking for new funds, but what we are asking for is that the current funds be utilized through our agency so that they're more effective. I mean, right now you have, no disrespect, but there's a bunch of bureaucrats in Ottawa making decisions that sometimes they don't have the full picture. One of our mottos is for us, by us, and we would ask to work with the agencies to say there is capability in the community. All you need to do is redirect some of those funding so that the funding is more effective.
Excellent. Well, Arnold, thank you so much for your time today and fleshing out this issue. I really do appreciate that. And I wish you the best in your efforts going forward.
We appreciate you giving us the opportunity, and I'm optimistic that a positive change will occur. Once again, we have people who are in the community, so I think that makes a big difference, and are aware of the overall needs. And presumably they would have some authority to direct the bureaucrats to allocate other resources.
Here's hoping. Thank you so much again.
Take care. Thank you.
Michelle Vandevord joins me now. She is the Director of Saskatchewan First Nation Emergency Management. We're talking about the upcoming wildfire season, Michelle, which shows some early signs of being particularly bad. How prepared would you say First Nations communities are for this fire season this year?
Each year always brings challenges. I believe our communities are prepared. What we're seeing here in Saskatchewan is a lot of our fires are really being driven by high winds, which has made it extremely difficult for anybody to contain these fires.
So what have you been hearing from your colleagues in other provinces? Are they prepared, or are they seeing the same conditions?
I believe everybody is fighting the same conditions. We're seeing earlier starts to our fires year after year. I remember, 6 years ago, and we would still be really in preparedness mode in April. And now we're seeing fires popping up, and they're not small fires. They're leading to huge wildfire events for our communities as well.
So are the communities becoming more prepared each year simply because of what they've seen and learned over the years?
Definitely. Lessons learned, it has become very important. I think a lot of communities are even seeing what their neighbors are dealing with. And what really warms my heart is right across the country, we're seeing a lot of nation to nation responding and supporting, which is so close to my heart to see one Indigenous community helping the other, reaching out to support with evacuees, mental health supports, and that's a growing rate across this country.
What do you think of the idea of a national Indigenous fire suppression team? It's something that's been put forth by the National Indigenous Safety Council. Do you think something like that's a good idea?
I think it's a great idea. Anytime that you can see a first responder in yourself, not having to explain your situation or about your community, and having like people responding to your community who look like you, who talk like you. I think it's very important. And I see it here in Saskatchewan all the time when my officers are deploying to a community that they've worked alongside and helped to train. It's always just a sigh of relief knowing that there's people who know you in your community without even sometimes stepping foot on the ground, but just being an Indigenous person is such a valuable tool to have in a toolbox.
And you've touched on it a little bit already here, but, there are such incredibly high costs associated with fighting wildland fires, replacing homes and infrastructure. But what are some of the human costs of these fires?
Anytime a community is dealing with even a potential evacuation, it really takes a toll on your mental health and that fear. We just had a huge fire event in James Smith Cree Nation, and I just got a call from one of the community firefighters, and he said, "Can you please come to the school and talk to our children because they're very afraid of fire now." They lost some homes in their last wildfire event, and it's a huge fear of fire. Before, during, and after an event, we see vulnerable people such as single mothers or women with children. Very hard to manage your family in a very small setting such as a hotel room. In Saskatchewan, we moved away from the big congregate shelters to hotel rooms, and then just the fear of losing your home. You never know what's happening during the fire. If your home's at risk, a lot of people worry that their homes might be broken into, and that's anywhere in Canada when you're away from home and away from your community.
Right. Well, keeping elders and others in their homes seems to be the ideal scenario compared to the upheaval and stress of evacuating. What are some of the measures or the tools that have worked to that end?
One of the biggest, most successful prevention activities that we started here in Saskatchewan is deploying air filtration units to our elders' homes. Because a lot of times before a wildfire will hit a community, they're being impacted by the smoke days and weeks ahead of the fire actually threatening a community. So what we started doing is for our elders is home purifiers, and it does allow them to stay home in the community a lot longer because they are the most vulnerable. They would usually be the first to evacuate. And we've been able to see elders stay home longer. We work very closely with the health teams on reserve, and we've seen it is working. And it was a great initiative, and it's something we're still doing to this day.
So I understand that, each year, with federal government, you have to, present your plans and such. And there's always some funding changes happening with Indigenous Services Canada from year to year. So that must be kind of challenging to work around. How does it impact agencies like yours?
Through the Emergency Management Assistance Program, which is the main program for emergencies on reserve and the tools and preparedness activities, it is all proposal-based, which is very hard for communities who may not have a proposal writer or they don't know about the dollars that could be helping them prepare their communities. Even for my own organization, we are also proposal driven, and every year it's just resubmitting that proposal, and then also the wait time to see those dollars flow to an organization or a community. It takes some time, and I find that's where the gaps are, is for communities who want to be prepared. It's just too much in between time of writing that proposal and actually seeing the dollars in community.
Right. That would seem to be, something that should be focused on a little bit to sort of clean that up. So you guys aren't always faced with those challenges each year.
Yeah. And I always feel bad for the communities who don't have the proposal writers and aren't able to even access those funds. I sat on the National Steering Committee that was addressing the last audit on this program. And, there were some significant recommendations that came out of that report. And slowly we're getting through all of those recommendations, which was very challenging because you really need to dig deep into the ISK program itself and make policy changes, which we started to do some of that work, and it is still continuing to this day, the committee.
All right. Well, Michelle, thanks so much for your time today and explaining things to me. I guess we'll leave it there for now, and hopefully you have a good season ahead and not too stressful.
Oh, thank you so much.
This episode of APTN InFocus was produced by Mark Blackburn and Charmaine Straker. It was edited by Jesse Andrushko and hosted by me, Leanne Sanders, sitting in for Sierra Bettens. If you're enjoying the show, let us know by leaving a rating and a review. You can find more APTN podcasts like APTN News Brief and Truth in Politics on aptnnews.ca/podcasts or on your favorite player. If you'd like to write to us, our email address is infocus@aptnnews.ca. Thanks for listening.
I'm Kathleen Martins, a reporter with APTN News. Homeless, houseless, shelterless people aren't hard to find in Winnipeg, a city of about 1 million in the middle of the prairies. They're on sidewalks, in bus shelters, and down alleyways. They're living in tents and squatting in empty buildings. They're even sleeping in abandoned cars. But who are they?
This building here it's pretty awesome because a lot of the relatives know that if they ever need anything, they can come there and get clothes or food or...
I like that you call them relatives.
Well, we're all related in a sense, right?
Downtown Safety Patrol Manager Vinnie Lilly is referring to the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people who make up more than half of the city's homeless population. They come from rural and remote communities. Find out why and hear their stories in a new 5-part APTN News podcast with me called Our Relatives.